Cool. All right. Well, we're still studying in the book of Genesis, and we're in the interesting life of Jacob. And if you remember last week, Jacob got away from Laban. He's heading back to his homeland that he had fled 20 years prior. And we all remember that he happens to have a brother back there. And that's the reason why he went and ended up working for Laban for 20 years. So he's on the way, and where we left off last week in chapter 32, he had started to separate everything into two camps with the logic: if Esau strikes one camp, the other will get away, vice versa, and he's concerned. So, but he prayed, and when he prayed, we saw faith, that he's really developing and growing in faith, putting the Lord in remembrance of what he said, which is a good thing. But then he also is expressing his fear. And so he's still developing that, but he's come to a point of really being in a place of demonstrating faith and having that faith produce results in his life. It's manifested while he was working for Laban, and in even getting away from Laban, because Laban was pretty mad, and the Lord appeared to him and protected him. And he tells the Lord that, but then he goes right to fear in Esau. So it's very descriptive of how we can be. And we see that with other characters in the Bible, that the Lord saw fit to let us see that what we might try to elevate and say, well, they're like the superheroes, of the Bible. Characters are superheroes, super Christians, super believers, and we can never do that. So that's them, but this is us. The Bible lets us see that they can be in faith one moment and then in fear the next moment. And we see that over and over with different people. And Jacob's a great example of that. What I like to, as we get ready to move forward, just say, is just note that God, he's just looking for faith. He says, Jesus said, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. And so whatever the obstacle is in your life, you can have an impact through your faith. And we need to be reminded of that. Jacob, is struggling with that a little bit, but he's really gotten to this place of faith, and the Lord's manifesting it. So God appears in the dream, and then I think we read last week that the angels appeared as he was on his way, and then he separated the two camps. So God's demonstrating that he's going with and before Jacob, and he tells us he'll do that, and yet Jacob is a person who lives in his head. He thinks he needs to help God out. We see that pattern. So you can be in a place of a lot of faith, but still try to add to that. Abraham, it kind of runs in the family a little bit, and so he'll express faith, but then he'll start to put his hands on the situation, and you'll see that as this plays out. And the really cool thing that's going to happen as we pick up with verse 13. Let me turn on the scripture. And so he's divided the company. He's at this place. Remember last week, Esau, he sent the servants, and they came back and said, your brother Esau is coming, and he has 400 people with him. That's enough to get you, kind of freaked out, and that's what happened. So That's where he's at. So he hears that, verse 13, he lodged there at that place the same night, and he took what came to his hand as a present for Esau his brother. And we read this, 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 foals. Then he delivered them to the hand of his servants and drove by itself, every drove by itself. And he said to his servants, pass over before me and put some distance between successful droves. So each of these that you just seen listed are going to go in droves, or you could say waves, groups. And so pass over before me, go in groups or in waves, and have a distance between each one after another. So he commanded in verse 17, the first one, saying, when Esau my brother meets you and asks you, saying, to whom do you belong, and where are you going? Whose are these in front of you? Then you shall say, they are your servant Jacob's. It's a present sent to my lord Esau, and behold, he is also behind us. Now, let me just say, you see a humility in Jacob at this point. It can be some fear-based and all, but he's trying to appease any lingering feelings that Esau might have, but he's also expressing words of honor. My lord Esau, he's saying, he's coming. Your brother's coming. Uh-huh. So it's that family relationship, that reminder. He's coming back, and these are all his. And he said, I want you to give them to my brother, and he said, my lord Esau. So it's a respect thing, and that might feel kind of good to Esau, who had the birthright stolen and all. So the younger has received, and that the Lord said that's the way it was because of Esau's own, fleshly desire and yielding to those things and despising, as Hebrews says, his birthright and all of that, just for a bowl of, I don't care how good the soup is, it's not worth that, because it was more than just the physical inheritance. We know it is significant. He was in the lineage of Christ. But the Lord knew all that would happen and said that would be the way it is. So he said, to the second in verse 19, and the third, and all who followed in droves, saying, in this manner you shall speak to Esau when you find them, and also say, behold, your servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him. That's that lingering anger, with the present that goes before me, and afterward I will see his face, and perhaps he will accept me. So he's going in faith because he doesn't know the outcome. He does get his hands on it, send these waves one after another, but what he's doing with that is repeatedly saying, because each one is told to say the same thing,